It's a new year, and with that comes new gear. We're starting off strong with a first look at Sony's latest full-frame camera, the A9iii. Since the A9iii had pre-launch firmware, I'm not going to judge it fully, but I am going to talk about my experience using it. If you're shooting anything moving at high speed, unpredictably, or both, then this is the camera for you. The A9iii is, from what I can see, Sony's newest grail camera, alongside the A1 and the A7R5. Features such as 120 frames per second raw stills capture with a no blackout viewfinder, Sony's most current AI autofocus features, and thoughtful body design make the A9iii one of Sony's most compelling cameras to date. So let's start off with the overall feel of this camera. The A9iii has undergone a facelift and has had all of its sharp edges smoothed out. The grip and the front dial area is much more rounded than Sony's typical design scheme, and I'm here for it. For me, this is one of the most comfortable cameras that they've ever made, and though it's heavier than its predecessor, the A9 II, it is slightly lighter than the A1 and the A7R5. My hands just fit more comfortably with the A9iii than past cameras, and when combined with the VG85 vertical grip, you can get even better ergonomics and increased power capacity. Both the touchscreen and the viewfinder have been massively upgraded from the A9 II. The viewfinder resolution has been more than doubled in resolution, while there has also been a good bump in resolution to the touchscreen. The touchscreen is also the tilt flip screen that we first saw on the A7R5, and I for one am glad to see it implemented in other cameras. Hopefully this continues moving forward, but this is nice to see it on another camera. Both these screens were really impressive. Having bright responsive screens is super helpful for both shooting and review purposes, which brings me to the zero blackout feature of the viewfinder in the A9iii. It's a real game changer, but at first it is a little bit jarring because you don't get a ton of visual feedback that you're actually taking a photo since there's no blackout. But once you get used to this, tracking your subject becomes a lot easier, well, because there's no blackout. So I have a pretty strong prescription, and this is one of the first cameras I've used where the diopter was actually able to get close to my prescription or allow me to see a really sharp image without needing glasses. This is a big deal for me because in almost any weather I run pretty warm, and fogged up glasses is a constant thing when shooting. Could I get contact lenses to solve this problem entirely? Yes, but I don't really want to do that. I don't like the idea of putting things in my eyes. It's just me. Finishing off my thoughts on the body design, the new custom function button on the front of the camera is a welcome addition, and its out-of-the-box function of varying burst mode frame rate is super handy. My only issue is when you're using the vertical grip, that this button is slightly positioned just out of the way of being comfortable. I kind of have to reach with my middle finger to be actually able to get it and do the job. Now, that is my opinion for where this button placement is. If you have bigger or smaller hands, it might be the perfect placement for that button, so everyone's hands are different, but that's how I felt while shooting it. Overall, the A9iii is a very comfortable camera and a reasonably light setup, even with the vertical grip. I think I've said it before, but I will almost always choose to shoot with a vertical grip, and this is certainly no exception. So the A9iii is absolutely packed to the gills with features. It's got the newest autofocus AI chip and dual Bions XR processors. If you've ever used the A7R5 or other cameras like the A6700, you're gonna know just how powerful that AI autofocus is. All these features and tech are being used in combination with the newly developed Exmor RS CMOS sensor. It's interesting to see how the same chipset can be reworked for different applications, in this case for high-speed capture instead of high-resolution photography. Though the autofocus tracking for humans is outstanding, the animal and bird tracking could still use a little bit of work. Often the camera will select the tree branch even though the bird or animal is the obvious subject. If I change the focus area to something smaller like flexible spot, medium, or small, the results would actually be much more accurate. I'd attribute that to the fact that you need to be more involved with where that flexi spot is. The autofocus can then focus on a smaller range of pixels, making it more accurate. Do keep in mind though that I was using pre-launch software, and in some circumstances I was using third-party lenses, both of which can create a less than complete experience. Now that's enough about autofocus. Let's talk about burst rates and new sensor tech. My goodness, this thing is a submachine gun of sorts. With a max burst rate of 120 frames per second in H+, the processors in the A9iii must be absolutely doing double time to get you shots that fast. I shot RAW and JPEG extra fine simultaneously to the same card, and I barely noticed a need for buffering. I used 2 different types of media to see if I'd noticed the difference, and I'm sure if you were really laying down the hammer you would notice, but from my experience there wasn't really a performance difference between the Sony Tough CFExpress and my Angelbird AVPRo SDXC. The bigger limitation was card space, so you go through gigs really fast. I shot over 10,000 images during a 3-hour shoot, and that equated to more than 128 gigs of data. To video shooters that might not sound like much, but for me personally, I've never gotten anywhere close to shooting that many gigs of photos in one 3-hour period. If you were at an event all day shooting high burst rates, you'd need to be more careful with your data consumption. That, or just don't shoot 120 FPS constantly. That is a little overkill in certain situations. So not only are your images more likely to be in focus, the introduction of a global shutter makes banding and rolling shutter effect virtually non-existent. And the reason for this is because of the way a global shutter captures light. In the simplest way, a global shutter captures an image immediately, while a rolling shutter captures an image in the same way that pixels are displayed on a TV, line by line. The moment in time between the first line and the last line of pixels are ever so slightly different, and that is what causes an image to have the smearing effect, like where a bird will move its wing and there's weird distortion, or when you have a vertical object and you're whipping the camera past and it becomes all noodly. That's rolling shutter effect. So with the global shutter, that is not a thing because the image is captured instantaneously from top to bottom. Basically, this camera is made for those who need to capture time in an instant of an instant. And in some cases, you need the camera to capture the instant before you can capture the instant. And that brings me to one of the most overpowered features of the A9iii, the pre-burst mode. This feature allows you to capture up to 1 second of photos at 120 frames per second burst rate before you release the shutter button. As long as you're autofocusing, the camera is using the buffer to take pictures. When you actually press the button down, it saves the images, letting you get that perfect shot you might have missed otherwise. This, in my opinion, is an absolute must-have feature. In the time that I had with the A9iii, I found the pre-burst mode was most useful with small animals. Birds and small mammals are twitchy little buggers that move fast and often unpredictably. Pre-burst mode helps you be as responsive as them. I think I really put the A9iii through its paces on this video, and I was really impressed by its performance. Love the viewfinder, love that new burst rate, love the new ergonomics and physical design. From the dials and screens to the out-of-this-world focus and shooting speeds, you can be confident that the A9iii can keep up with anything that you throw at it. Alright, that's everything I've got to say this week. Peace out, Girl Scouts. Bye!